Welcome back to part 2 of our delicious conversation with Eric Brooker. He is a business leader, author, and host of the acclaimed podcast, Counsel Culture. His latest book is You Are Enough, Overcoming Lifelong Doubts of Worthiness. And in part 1 of the show, we were really talking about relationship capital, what that is, and how to build it, and why it's so important. It's really about having these conversations that you don't normally think about in the context of being a leader, but are vital for building loyalty. As you know, if you are a fan of my book, Fiercely Loyal, we talk a lot about reciprocal vulnerability in that book and about how that is what builds true loyalty. And that's not going to happen unless you as the leader do it. And Eric talked a lot about that. He talked about his origin story of what drove him to become more successful in his life and having supportive family and the other side of what that was like too, and what drove him to actually write the book. And that oftentimes, as any of us who've written books will tell you, there's a lot in the book that's usually for the author, maybe more than it is for the leader. So we talked about all that in part 1 of the show. If you didn't catch part 1, I highly encourage you to go back. It's filled with gems. Go back, click on part 1, have a listen to it. I promise you'll find it truly fascinating. We're going to go back into part 2 of the show, and we're going to talk more about really integrating this idea of worthiness. We were talking about in part 1, this self-doubt thing. It's not exclusive to you. I know you might be listening to this and thinking, oh yeah, but these people don't get it. Listen, we've all had it. We've all had massive amounts of it. Fortunately, as you get a little bit older and you do the work on yourself and you do self-discovery, it dissipates considerably, but it's going to bubble up. And so this is a really important piece for you to understand as you are moving forward, whether you are a next-gen leader or an established leader. So, Eric, I want to ask you, why do you believe relationship capital is a key focus for leaders? I think that we think about leadership as being decisions, and as you said in part 1, checking the KPIs. Why is relationship capital so important for leaders?
First of all, I want to address this idea. I call it imposter syndrome, which sets in, you said, as you get older, as we get older, it dissipates. But there are definitely times where I'll look at my calendar and I'll have a meeting and I'll think, do they know that I'm not qualified to be the leader in the room or the thought leader on the topic or whatever? And then I realize that's imposter syndrome setting in. I'm in that meeting. You are in that meeting or in your role with that title for a reason. People know you're qualified. Relationship capital and this importance on taking care of your peoples become ever more important, because I believe this new generation of worker, they want to be felt and heard. And for my generation, it was about, hey, do you want a MacBook or a PC? I felt like they cared about me when I got my MacBook. This generation now really wants to feel like they're having an impact. That Tom's shoes, buy a pair, give a pair. Bombas does the same thing. That's the type of work environment we want to be in. We want to feel like we're a part of the day-to-day, and building relationship capital is just the start. The reality of it is, again, there's data that backs up. We're all going to work harder. If you can keep your employees 6 months longer, just 6 months longer, do the math on that. The cost of turnover is astronomical. If you can get 6 months more out of an employee, or 6 years, or 6 whatever, you're going to be more profitable. It's interesting that you asked this question. I was just hired to give a talk to Amazon, and Amazon asked me to give a talk slightly different than the talk I normally give. And they're Amazon, so they can do that sort of thing. And it was about the culture of security. And this is for Amazon Web Services. How do we create a culture of security where your employees are as focused on security of your intellectual property, of your proprietary information, of potentially inadvertently opening a file they shouldn't have, creating an unsecure environment? And what it really boils down to is caring for your people. If you care for your people beyond just KPIs and data sets and reports and metrics and all of that, they're then invested in the business. And if you can get your people invested in the business, they're going to be focused on security. They're going to have a culture of security. They're going to have a culture of doing what's right by the business. They're going to have a culture of, hey, honey, I'm going to be 15 minutes late. I got to finish. I want to finish this project. What we've realized is caring for our people. Dare I say, it goes back to the golden rule: do unto others as you would have them do unto you. When we care for people the way we want to be cared for, we're all happier. We all work harder.
Can you give us an example of what you do to create a positive workplace culture, to create a relationship capital culture?
The first thing you have to do as a leader, you've got to do the internal work. You need to have a tough conversation with yourself and determine whether or not you have a positive culture in the workplace. Chances are you as a business leader have enough relationship capital with someone in the business that after you've sat and reflected, man, I think we have a great culture in the business. I mean, the vinyl lettering on the wall says we have an incredible culture. First and foremost, take that down. Take the parking spot for the CEO, take that down. And then start to do the internal reflection of, we have an external culture that we say that we live. Are we actually doing that? And after you have written down how you feel as the CEO or founder or whatever your role is, then go find that person. Maybe it's your spouse. Maybe it's your co-founder. Maybe it's your chief of staff. Then you have the Dove, off the record. Tell me about our culture. Nothing is off limits. Tell me about it. And then you start to, well, I just don't understand why you get your own parking spot. Like, why do you get a parking spot? I'm here at 4 o'clock in the morning when it's still dark outside. Why do you get your own parking spot? You don't roll in till 10 o'clock on Tuesdays anyway. Or, hey, we say we have this culture of trust, but I'm always putting reports together. Why am I putting reports together? Then the work begins. Once you actually hear from people about the culture in the workplace, about how they feel the culture in the workplace is, then you can start to have the dialogue. They want to see you as the leader, first in and first out. They want to see you as the leader, the one that's vulnerable. Hey, I want to try and be the first one in. Here's a great example. I had an old boss, John. We'll leave it at John for the purposes of this example. John was in at 6 o'clock in the morning. I tried to beat him. I found out he was there every day at 6 a.m. Never asked why. I thought, well, he's the leader. Got it. Every Wednesday he was gone at noon and never came back. So one day, as the curious guy that I am, I said, hey, John, what's this Wednesday thing? What's going on? He says, shut the door. So my wife's got pretty bad MS. He goes, the caretaker gets there at 4 in the morning. I feed my wife breakfast. I get her showered. I get her dressed. And the caretaker is on at 5:30. Wednesdays, the caretaker needs to leave. And whatever subsidy we get doesn't allow someone else. That's the vulnerability. That's the moment where he let me in and our relationship changed. Because I wasn't working for him to make his quota. I was working for him to love his wife. And what a beautiful example he was to care for his wife the way that he did. But that internal, before you get vulnerable, before you start buying people dark roasts and all that, like we talked about in that first episode, we've got to do the internal work. We've got to really figure out, do I have the culture that I want in the business? And it's okay if you come to the conclusion that you are not what you want to be. Sit everybody down and say, I want to change the culture in the business, and I recognize that I'm the problem.
I fully agree with everything you've just said, but, and here's the but, and it's I like big butts and I cannot lie. I mean, it's a big but, right? And that is that 99.9% of leaders, maybe I'm being a little dark in this, are not usually willing to have that level of vulnerability. And what's more is, as I tell many of the leaders I work with, if you think you're going to get the truth out of your people, you're on crack. People go, well, why would that be? because their life depends upon you. If you fire them, they can't feed their kids or pay their rent. I remember sitting with a bunch of very high-level executives from different companies and explaining to them, asking them the question, who do you trust? And they tell me, and they say, what percentage of truth are you going to get from this? I can really trust this person. It's good 80, 90%. I go, you're lucky if you get 40. And they go, well, what do you mean? Because their life depends upon you. Their kid's not going to private school. They can't pay the lease on the Mercedes or whatever it is if you are pissed off at them. So they're going to always butter it up. So there's the first challenge, is getting to the truth inside of your own organization where you have all the power. That's number one challenge. And number two challenge is, how honest are you able to be with yourself without having a genuine great mentor, therapist, coach, whatever term you want to use, who can really call you on your shit? And oftentimes we don't have that, because that would mean being vulnerable. So we're at this juxtaposition here, this great challenge of, I want the truth, but I can't get the truth. And I can't get the truth because I don't give the truth, but I can't give the truth because it's not safe.
Somebody needs to say, you can't handle the truth. No, sorry. I had to make the movie reverent.
You can't handle the
So two things. That coach, that's a part of what I do, is that coaching. That CEO and COO parking sign, that was for a consulting engagement. We pulled in and I looked at him, and it was the first real work-related conversation. I said, hey, the signs have to go. You need to start parking elsewhere. And he said, why? They've always been here. I said, are you better than anybody in the business? He said, no, I mean, that's not the culture we have here. I said, the sign says different. People will always judge the culture of your business on what it is that they see compared to what it is that you say. Meaning, if the vinyl letters on the wall say you have this incredible culture, I'm going home telling my wife, yeah, they think they have this culture. Let me tell you the actual culture of the business. To your point, my life depends on it. My Ford payment, my mortgage, my school payment, the whole 9 yards. So you're right. Oftentimes, you're not going to get that authenticity that you'd hope. You know who you get it from? Call Larry. He quit 6 months ago. He still hates you. He will tell you unequivocally that you have the worst culture in the company. He'll tell you why he left. He'll tell you why other people are about to leave. And then do like they do in the Olympics. Take out the high score, take out the low score, merge them in the middle, and between what you get from your current employees and what you get from Larry or whomever just quit, call a couple of them. Hey, can I take you to lunch? Can you tell me what happened? Why did you leave? Because now I have no skin in the game. You want me to tell you how bad it was? I will tell you exactly how bad it was. And the companies that think they do it best, I've got a client right now that has actually a pretty good culture, but they're a great example. They've got a chef. They bring lunch in every single day. What do you want? We'll make it for you. But that's not your culture. That is a benefit, no different than a dental exam.
And no different than a cappuccino
100%.
Beanbags. It doesn't make a balls of difference when it all boils down to it. I look at those things and think that's great, but you mentioned a certain company earlier that you've gotten asked a presentation for who claim a certain culture, and I know people involved in their business at a very, very high level of consulting and at a very high level, like L7, inside of their organization, and it's a culture that's horrific. But they've got lots of benefits. And benefits are not a great culture.
Which actually brings back without naming names, it brings back the interesting question of why are people going back into the office? I think there is probably just cause. I live in the town that 3M will say they built. So 3M, we all know the name, 3M, Post-it notes, the whole 9 yards, all the sticky stuff. They didn't require anybody to go in during COVID. And everyone in my neighborhood, with the exception of me, it seems, works at 3M, and many of them are required to go back into the office 3, 4, 5 days a week. If we mastered working from home, and there's companies out there that can see what you're doing on your corporate computer, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok, whatever it is that you're doing, they give you a productivity score. They see that you're potentially more productive, and yet they're asking you to inconvenience yourself and come back into the office. I think for some it's just and prudent. I think for some it's absurd. I think if I am more productive at home, let me work from home in most cases. In some cases, it doesn't work that way.
No, I fully agree with you. In some cases, it just doesn't work at all. In some cases, it's completely ludicrous to be asking people to come back in. But back to your point in part one of the show, which is relationship capital. And when I'm asked about it, and I'm brought in, I just did a presentation for a global organization a few weeks ago in Toronto, and I was asked about that very subject, about bringing people in. And I said, listen, the only reason to bring people in who were just as productive at home, maybe more productive, there's only one reason to bring them in. And they go, what's that? Community, relationships. That's why, because there's shit that happens when you're walking down the hallway and you bump into someone that doesn't happen when you work remote. And so you need to create that environment. So you've got all this office space that you don't need anymore. Section off a part of that that's a community area that has the bean bags and the coffee machines and all the other things, but actually encourages people to come and hang out. Not to work, just hang out. And so you go, oh, look, I haven't seen Eric. And he's, Eric, how you doing? How's the wife? How's the kids? And we're having this chit-chat, and it's on work hours, but I'm not expected to work during that time because that's an accumulation of these 5 minutes, 2 minutes, 1 minute, 10 minutes that go on throughout the week. It's suddenly like I get to go into the office and hang with everybody. And I go, oh, I'm working on this. You did something like that, didn't you? And you go, yeah, I did this. Oh, that's exactly what I needed. That's the stuff that is the water cooler stuff that we can facilitate. And I work with companies around this, facilitating that in a different environment while still understanding that people have created lives that no longer require getting on a bloody bus or driving through traffic or all the other nonsense that is just not required.
We have to stop counting hours. For nearly everybody in the workforce, most of us got hired to do a job. And some weeks it's going to take 40 hours. Other weeks it's going to take 80 hours. There's weeks it might take 10 hours. But if you're doing the job, don't just stack. Listen, I do a lot in the tech space, and one of the common themes that we're seeing right now is layoffs and people taking on the workload of the people that were just laid off because they seem to have capacity. Stop putting other people's work on someone that's still there. There's a reason it was a whole other person's job. But if your people are doing the job and they cut out on Wednesdays to go to their daughter's volleyball game, ask them on Thursday how the volleyball game went. Don't ask them if they got their project done. That's not what they want to hear. We're going to know in the next one-on-one whether or not they got that project done. And then maybe we pull from the relationship capital bank and say, hey, I don't mean to be that guy, but it's been 3 months. You've been struggling to finish this project. The one common theme is that you're leaving every Wednesday at 2 to go to your daughter's volleyball game. I don't know if it's that or something else, but are you able to get the hours in necessary? Then all of a sudden it comes from a place of relationship.
Yeah, I think that hours is a very silly measurement. It's very simple. Can you do this? Yes. Can you do it by this time and complete it to a high level? Yes. No. No? Okay. I don't care if you work at 4 a.m. and you want to play golf in the afternoon. It's irrelevant to me. What's relevant to me is, can you do this by this time at a high level? So I don't want you to just do it by this time and it be crap and now I've got to go over it because now I'm stuck. Can you do it and do it at a high level by this time? Yes. Okay. So I can trust you on that. Yes. So we come to it and it's like, well, it's a 70% job and you did it on time. So now I'm stuck because I've now got to go over it and fix it. That doesn't work for me. So you either have to put more intention into what you're doing or more hours, and maybe both. I don't know. What do you have to do? That's a conversation between two human beings as opposed to cracking a whip and watching the watch. What is that? Are we working in factories? I don't understand it. That's so non-relational. It just doesn't make any sense. I know we've gone into a lot of different areas here. What do you think most people misunderstand? What's the great misunderstanding about relationship capital in the context of leadership?
I think the common pushback I get in talks, in leading up to my talks and after my talks, is I don't want to be vulnerable. You don't have to share. We've talked about this. You don't have to share like I've chosen to share in my book or in my talks. You just have to start. Your daughter not making the volleyball conversation, me buying you a cup of coffee every 3 weeks, just the way you like it, buying you a Home Depot gift card when you bought a house. That's all the little stuff. So you don't have to get super deep. What it will do is it will help you establish deeper relationships, and dare I use the F word on your show, even friendships with some of the people that you work with. The other thing that I think is a big misunderstanding is I don't know where to start. Where do I start? All right, Eric, you got me. I get it. I need to care for my people better. And then the third one that comes to mind, don't put on an act. I have a great friend in the tech space who could care less about relationship capital. He doesn't care about you. He doesn't care about me. His personality is such where like, we got a private equity investment. We got to get an ROI on this in 3 to 5 years because that is when they exit. And he puts on a face, and I think most people see it. I don't think some people are built for this. And then, dare I say, and if you're not built for caring well for others, you might be a really good doer, but you're probably not a great leader. And that's okay.
That's a really interesting point, Eric. We'll use somebody real as an example. Take an Elon Musk. He definitely is on the spectrum. Not really a great relational guy. You can tell by his 150 children and 700 wives. He's almost an Arab sheikh. This is a guy who's not great at that stuff, but he has brilliance and genius in his own ways. But I think the challenge is that oftentimes the people who are crap at it don't know they're crap at it. And so they actually don't get that they're doing a terrible job, and they actually believe they're being relational. That's the challenge.
If you're not measuring some metrics and data, and I mean, like, data is king right now. We talk about that in everything we do at work. All of us do. Measure the data. If you don't want to have a business coach or a mentor because that's not how you're built, go pick up a business book and see how your data matches up to the rest of the world's data. Gallup does studies. Gartner does studies. Forrester does studies. I'll give a great example. Bruce Daisley was an executive at Twitter when it was Twitter, but when it launched in Europe, and he said came on my show, he was like my first real guest. He said to me, we were getting together every Friday after work, maybe it was Thursday, every week after work to have a going away party. And what I realized after a few months is that I'm doing something wrong. If everybody is leaving the business and we're doing this at the frequency of every single week, am I a good leader? What am I doing wrong? And to your point, I've done 151 episodes. He's the first and maybe the only person that has said, I may not have been a great leader. And I recognized it on my way to a going away happy hour. But look at the data. Compare yours to others, and you might find an abnormality that you need to solve for.
Again, everything you've said is absolutely right, on the head. No doubt about it. But the key is, this missing piece is, do you, as you listen to this, do you have the gonads to step up and look in the mirror and go, what if I'm the problem? If your people are leaving at record rates, it isn't because Gen Z are lazy or millennials are all self-involved. You might be the common cause. Now, are millennials different than boomers? Yes. Are Gen Z different even than millennials? Yes. That's not the point. The point is, very simply, to use your term around the data, are Gen Z staying anywhere? Because if they're not, you've got a fair argument. But if they are, well, maybe it's you.
Chris Shipley wrote a book. She came on the show. It was something about adaptability, but I've really played this out. Her thesis when she wrote the book a few years ago was the workforce is going to change. The people that will find the most success are the ones that are most adaptable. Never did she say they're going to quit and go somewhere else. The rules are going to change inside of the firms they're working for today. Their adaptability matters, but so does ours as business leaders. We have to be able to adapt. I'm watching my kids not use AI in class, and I'm really curious. I wasn't able to use Wikipedia in the early days of Wikipedia 20 some odd years ago, but now it's generally seen as a viable source. In fact, I couldn't even use the internet when I was in college because it wasn't seen as a viable resource. I wonder at what point we as leaders are going to say, okay, we're going to put some guardrails around where you can use these tools because we too are going to adapt.
I can remember David Langer, whose dad was a businessman who traveled around the world. David Langer's dad came back from Hong Kong, and David came into class with a thing about the size of an iPad and a calculator, and it was taken off him. You can't use a calculator. So it's really interesting, as you said, it's adaptability, and I think that that's on us as leaders to recognize that we have to be the ones who are adapting. And I think that oftentimes leaders are the ones who are clinging to something old and bemoaning the fact that things have changed or our generation has changed. Here's the news. The generation has changed. Here's the news. The marketplace has changed. Here's the news. It's all been changing. That's all there is to it. It's changing. So what are you doing to be not only resilient, but anti-fragile, building that muscle as it comes forward so that you are going, okay, we're ready for this. We're ready for whatever it takes. The people who are going to make the millions are only 17 years old now because they understand AI in ways that somebody in my generation or your generation will never understand it. And we might be very interested, but it's not going to be intuitive to us.
Do you know who invented the digital camera? It was Kodak.
They had it on display in the main entrance, and it put them out of business because they didn't adapt to the...
They were terrified people would stop buying film, and so they put that idea on the shelf. Blockbuster had a $10 million acquisition at bay, and they decided to pass on a company called Netflix.
Twice.
I beg your pardon. That's right.
Twice.
It's, dare I say, adapt or die. The people coming in the workforce, I'm 45 in a couple of weeks. The people, me, I still want a MacBook if I'm going to work. I don't want a desk. Give me the tools at home to be successful. The people younger than me in age, most of them want to come to work for a purpose. That idea of buy a pair, give a pair, Tom's shoes. Yeah, that's great. I'd feel good about giving shoes to some kid in Rwanda, I think, but that's not going to make me choose a job. That's going to make them choose a job, and we have to recognize that when we lead.
Absolutely. Eric, it has been a pleasure and an honor, sir. Thank you so much. I've loved our conversation. It really has been inspiring. Please tell our listeners, our viewers, where they can find out more about you, your book.
First of all, thank you for the work that you're doing. Thank you for having me on the show. I am on LinkedIn, pretty active on social, LinkedIn mostly, just Eric Brooker. That'll be in the show notes. And then my website, where you can find the book, you can find my speaking, you can find the podcast, is just ericbrooker.com.
Thank you. And again, we'll make sure that all those links are published in the show notes so you can find all of them, including a link back to part 1 of the show so you don't miss anything. Remember, those who control the meaning for the tribe also control the movement of that tribe, and leaders committed to positively shaping political and business landscape know that they've got to tap into what drives human behavior, and that is the emotional source code. I am Dov Barron. I show businesses, teams, and leaders how to harness their emotional source code to move their tribe, because unified, actualized meaning, purpose, is the single monolithic difference between mediocrity and greatness for individuals and for companies. Remember, we need your help in staying relevant, so please Go to wherever it is that you tune into the show from. Do us a favor. It really matters, and we really love it when you do it. And that is rate, review, and subscribe. And the more you do it, the more we can keep coming to you, and we really do appreciate it. Till next time, this is Dov Barron saying, stay curious, my friends. Stay curious about your relationship capital. Are you invested in your people so that your people are invested in you? Reciprocal vulnerability is the basis for trust. And that reciprocal vulnerability comes to you by investing in the relationship capital. Putting in. You will always get more out if you're willing to put in. But to do that, you're going to have to stay curious and you're going to have to stay courageous. I'm Dov Barron. I'm here to assist you, tapping into your deepest meaning to reach that next level of clarity, focus, purpose, and profit in your business, in your life, and your leadership impact. And I am out.